Welcome to the Actually You Can podcast. I'm Miff Galloway, a performance coach passionate about supporting ambitious and high-performing women just like you who know they have untapped potential just waiting to be unleashed. If you're looking to massively up-level your performance in all areas of life, you've come to the right place. My goal on this podcast is to take you beneath the surface so you can connect with yourself on a deeper level while providing you with valuable insights and the tools necessary to navigate life's challenges and go after your goals with strength, clarity, and wisdom. If you're ready to uncover the truth which lies underneath so you can recognize your powerful feminine leadership style, pursue your goals unapologetically, and thrive in every aspect of your life, hit the follow button and get ready to explore the incredible possibilities that lie within you. Together, we'll uncover your next steps in achieving peak performance, because actually, you can. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Actually You Can podcast. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of connecting with Lunaria Gaia, who is a woman of many talents, including a dynamic speaker, coach, podcast host, two-time best-selling author, and her superpower is helping humans to flourish and supporting them to live a life that lights them up. I'm so looking forward to diving deep into the subject of happiness today and unlocking the code to what it truly means to be happy. So welcome to the show, Lunaria. I'm so excited to have you here today.
And Miff, likewise. Chatting off air, I was like, this is going to be a rocking conversation. So listeners, you are just be prepared for a great conversation.
So let's hit everyone with some facts. I'm curious to hear, in your view, what percentage do you think of the population is currently unhappy with their life? Or what percentage as well do you think they're happy but are truly unhappy?
Yeah, I love the distinction of those two questions. And I also, I'm not going to speak factually here because it's going to be an educated guess. World's population, I believe that if we're talking first world, like, developed nations, I'm going to put it out there. I think it's probably about 98% of people aren't happy. 98, 99%. And there's a whole bunch of people who think that life's good enough or okay, but they are constantly miserable. They are not living a life on their terms. They are not living a life by design. They complain a lot about people and circumstances. I think the vast majority of people across the globe are not happy.
Yeah. And I would agree. I think it would be huge. And I'd love to hear, in terms of that 98%, if that's such a huge stat, why are we walking around unhappy? Like, are we choosing to be unhappy? Is it part of our conditioning? Is it just the human race is destined to be unhappy? We're meant to fit in some molds. Why are we walking around unhappy?
Yeah, look, I think that our minds are in charge, and our minds are designed to keep us safe, not to make us happy. So something as simple as that, something as simple as the fact that our minds are currently in charge. And if you had a company that was driven by someone who is based in fear, whose job is to keep everything safe and the same, then that company isn't going to be very productive. It's not going to be very fruitful because it's not willing to take risks. It won't stretch itself. It will forever stay in the same kind of loops of what it's doing now. That's what's happening to us. We are completely at the mercy of our mind, and that mind's job is safety, security, the same, comfort, staying where we are, not actually happiness. And that's the core reason why we are at large unhappy. I can go into so many more details around programming and conditioning, but the very source of it is that our minds are in charge, and our mind's job is to keep us safe, not happy.
Yeah. And so what would you classify as the definition of happiness?
Yeah, it's actually literally chapter 1 of my latest book. I was like, I need to really define this. And I can't even quote myself, Miff. It's not like I can quote myself from the book. Where is it? I have to find it. But I'm going to speak from my heart with that. Happiness is the deep indwelling of knowing that all is well and that you are okay, irrelevant of circumstances. And I think that people get it mistaken a lot. We expect that happiness is being in a good mood. We expect that happiness is joy. or that happiness is having everything go your way and getting everything that you want, and that you never fluctuate in mood. I consider myself an incredibly happy person, and I have self-doubt, and I have fears, and I have limitations, and my mind wants to take over, and circumstances don't go my way. The best way that I can describe it is think of it like an ocean. On the surface, the ocean is forever changing. There's big swell, there's small swell, there's storms, there is, sometimes it's gray, sometimes it's clear, sometimes there's lots of activity, sometimes it's still. But when you go deep down into the ocean, it gets darker and quieter and still. And that's where true happiness is. It's in the depths of us. It's not in the surface. It's not in the storm, the circumstances that change all the time, because that's life. It's actually in the deep, deepmost part of us that where our happiness truly lies. That's my definition of it.
It's beautiful and elaborate, and I love it so much. And what comes to mind when you share that is, I see happiness is a fleeting state or emotion. But from what you're saying, it sounds like it can be rooted much deeper and therefore a lot more sustainable than something that you just experience once you've achieved a goal or that you've gotten some material object. Is that correct in my understanding?
Yeah, I think that happiness is misdiagnosed. And that's part of the problem as well, right? We're expecting happiness to be, I'm always happy. I'm always have a smile on my face. Everything is always great. I always see the bright side of life. But to me, true happiness, lasting happiness, if we look at it from a Buddhist perspective, for example, there's a mantra that says, may all beings be happy and free. Actually, you might be able to hear the title of my book in that. Get happy and free. I don't believe that mantra of may all beings be happy and free is that may all beings have everything they've ever wanted and be filled with dopamine hits. That's not what the Buddha is trying to say.
Harsh but true. And so I'm also thinking that happiness isn't what I would just label toxic positivity as well. Like I know there's some people out there that have always got a smile on their face. They never seem to encounter any sort of what we classify as negative emotion. I'm doing like the air quotes here because I don't think there is really any negative emotion. But I feel like there's some people that just walk around with a smile on their face pretending everything is okay. I'm assuming that's not happiness.
It's not happiness at all. And I think that's misleading. It's the fake it till you make it, and that's part of my backstory is that I faked it till I didn't make it. It never came true, Miff. That was the problem. That was why I wrote the first book, because I was like, hang on a second here. I've done everything that you told me to do, the world, like I lost weight. I got a boyfriend. I found something that I was relatively good at. And hang on a second here. I'm still not happy. I still haven't got the things that you told me that I was going to get. And I pretended, but it wasn't authentic. It wasn't true. It wasn't the real lived experience of going through the storm, recognizing that storms come, they come and they go. That is reliably consistent, right? The inconsistencies of life are completely reliable. Toxic positivity, I have no time for. No time at all. Drives me nuts. Good vibes only, crap. That's delusional.
I love that. I would definitely going to circle back to that. But what you mentioned in previously is you mentioned that you were doing what everyone else told you to do, and you're like, hang on, is this what life's all about? I feel like I can share a similar journey. I feel like that was a lot of my 20s, and then it was when I got to my early 30s that I was like, actually, fuck this. Like, I can be happy. It's my life, and I'm going to pursue what makes me happy. Was that a similar sort of journey and time frame for yourself? Is the 20s for a lot of people the time where they either commit to confining to the molds and the expectations of everyone around them, or they use that time as an exploration period to then go, hang on, now that I have all this information, what I don't like and what I like, because what you don't like is also as important as finding out what you do like, and then you kind of take it from there. What was your personal experience with that?
I love what you just said about committed to confining yourself to the expectations of the world. That that feels really true for many, many people. And look, my experience is similar to that in terms of my 20s. My journey of exploration of hang on a second. of this, like, this isn't all up, it's cracked up to be. You know, I'm suspicious. I'm suspicious of the 9 to 5.
Yeah.
I was suspicious of, you know, skeptical of, I don't necessarily think that maybe the government's got my best interest at heart all the time. You know, I think I was a skeptical and suspicious younger person, even in my teens, but I was also a people pleaser. So that won out. People pleasing won out. Wanting to be approved and liked won out a lot in my teens. And so, yeah, my 20s, I think, was a catalyst of that. You know, I went sober at 25, which is practically unheard of. And I was traveling Europe at the time, 2 years in Europe. I was on what people might know as like a Kentucky tour. It wasn't a Kentucky, but it was a bus about. It was, you know, everyone's getting drunk every day. And I went sober because I'd never been sober since I was 15. And I wanted to know what it was like. So I think that was an opportunity for exploration. But Miff, I really want to highlight for depending on, you know, who's listening in here and tuning in, I work with a lot of women who are in their 50s and 60s who are even, you know, like immediate midlife too, like 40s, 50s and 60s, who never had that. Maybe they had kids. Maybe they had, you know, they got married young. Maybe they committed to a career and never has had the time or space to stop and actually review what's going on. So I think in our experience, yeah, our 20s, sure. You know, I think that's part of it, that our 20s did it for us. But I don't actually think that's true for a lot of people. I think that if you don't have the courage to explore in your 20s, you'll get to your 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond and go, what the hell happened? How did I get here?
I completely agree. And I think, you know, me, it was my 20s, and I would much prefer someone in their 40s to be like, hang on, I can do that now, than go, well, my 20s have passed. I can't explore my life anymore. And I had a very similar experience with a client that I was working with. She's in her early 40s and actually got made redundant. She'd been in her corporate role for 15 odd years. For the first time ever, she was given the opportunity to go, hang on, what do I actually want to do with my life? And I was like, fuck yeah, we're on here. Great question. Let's go. And so our journey for the last 6 months has been discovering what really truly lights her up now that she has the world at her feet. And it's such a powerful process to support someone through. So 100% caveat to anyone who's listening to this, who's past their 20s and into this next stage of life, you can go on this journey at any stage. Do not let that be a limiting belief or a limiting factor.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's why I spoke to that Miff, because I was sitting there going, I don't want anyone to sit there and go, oh, well, Miff and Luna both had this experience where that was their 20s and that was their opportunity. And I want everybody to know I continue to, and I'm sure you do too, Miff. I'll be 41 coming up, and I continue to challenge my status quo. I continue to challenge the beliefs that I have been given in my life, but also the ones that I've developed. You know, if I have strong convictions loosely held. And I think that's such a beautiful way to live life. Like, I believe in what I believe in wholeheartedly, but if new evidence comes along, okay, I'm willing to change that, because if I, you know, adapt or die, I think that we need to be willing to evolve.
100%. And, you know, something that I say I support people with is to move into their next evolution, because I wholeheartedly agree. We're always growing and evolve what we should be. Otherwise we're dying, right? And so nothing breaks my heart more than, I work with a lot of people in the fitness industry, and especially women and mums that go, I want to be back to what my body was before I had kids. And I'm like, yes, I appreciate that. But what about that period of your life makes you want to go back there? And also look at everything you've done since. You're not the same person you were back then. You have all this experience and strength and wisdom and knowledge and everything. Like, why do you wish you could go back?
Yes. Like, let's go forward. And let's maybe, I think when people say that, they're wanting to, you know, it's nostalgic, you know, they're romanticizing a past part of themselves. You know, I love that saying, is like, I wish I could be as fat as when I thought I was back then.
Oh.
You know, people will talk about, like, you know, they'll like, oh my gosh, I wish I was attractive and as fat as I was when I thought I was fat, you know, like, but people, I think that we need to take that as the lesson. If we take that as the lesson and go, hang on a second, if I'm looking back nostalgically on my 20s or 30s when I was younger, thinking that that was the be all end all, I wish I could have seen it. you're going to experience the same thing in another 10 or 20 years if you don't stop and see it now. So stop and see it now, because you're never going to be this young ever again. You might be more vital, you might have more energy, you might get stronger, your body might change, it definitely will. But you're never going to have this level of youth that you have right now. You're the youngest you're ever going to be again, and the oldest that you've ever been now. So can we stop and enjoy it?
Bold underline mic drop right there. Just end the show there, I think. But no, I have so much more I want to talk to you about. So we mentioned that we think that 98% of the population is walking around unhappy at the moment, which means that there's 2% that have figured it out. What do the 2% know or do that the rest of us aren't doing?
Yeah, I think it comes back to, what are the 98% doing? Well, their mind is in charge. And so I really believe that the 2% of people who are happy, so to speak, they're not letting their mind be the thing that's in charge of them. They're, if I want to speak it to, it's, for some people it's spirituality of like your higher self or your soul. I feel like from a very practical level, it's the observer within you. And everybody can have this experience irrelevant of what your spiritual or esoterical beliefs are. If you have ever noticed a thought, if you've ever heard a thought in your head, seen a thought or noticed a thought, there's an observer that's noticed that. And the power, there's separation in that. So there is you thinking the thought, and then there is someone else or something else or another part of you observing you thinking the thought. That observer is where your happiness is. That observer is what the 2% do really well. They've actually learnt how to master their mind rather than be a slave of it. That's what the 2% have done.
And what comes to mind when you share that as well is also an understanding that your thoughts aren't necessarily facts. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up, is they believe everything that they think to themselves. And so having that it's almost like a third party observer going, hang on, is that true? How do we know this to be true? Are we just bullshitting ourselves here? Or have we just made this up to make us feel good about ourselves or not feel good about ourselves? Because that's what we want to do right now.
Because there's an imprint, that narrative, the storylines that we tell ourselves, made up of I call it the ego, made up of our beliefs, made up of our thoughts, made up of our programming, conditioning, our values, what we think that we stand for, who we think we are, our identity. For the most part, that was created between the ages of 0 and 7. In all of us is known as the imprint period. So between that ages of 0 and 7, we have collected all the data. Like, we've been building a map of reality in those first 7 years. Men equal this, money equals that, fitness equals that, success equals this. We've literally been looking around the world as a blank slate, labeling everything, right? But for the vast majority of us, we didn't have necessarily conscious parents who were checking in to see what our labeling was. And they haven't checked their own labeling, and their parents didn't check their labeling, and society doesn't check their labeling. So very often you'll find that people will just believe what their parents did, or they rebel against it. But when is it, what do I actually believe? What is actually true for me? And I'll give you an example, if I will. I remember having this moment, Miff, where I was probably in my late teens, early 20s. And I was standing in the shower, I had the razor, and I was just shaving my armpits like I did every day. And yet they were itchy and bumpy and scratchy, right? And I was shaving my armpits, and mid-shave, I thought to myself, why am I doing this? It was such an unconscious thing. It was such a habitual thing that that's what I do ever since someone told me when I was 9, quite literally, that armpit hair was awful and that women shouldn't have it and then you're meant to shave it off. I'd been doing it since I was 9. Now, 9, 10, 11 years later, I actually stopped to think about why I was doing it. And I realized that I didn't know. It was just because someone told me that that's what I meant to do. I didn't know why. I didn't know if it was true for me. Do I like armpit hair? Now, for reference, this is 20 years ago. 22 years ago, I wasn't in feminism era where growing your armpit hairs in the 60s and 70s. I wasn't in woke culture now where grow your armpit hair, body hair is accepted. like we're talking the 2000s, early 2000s here. So it was not a socially acceptable time for women to have body hair. And I just decided that I was going to see what it was like. I stopped shaving my armpits that day, and I wanted to see whether or not I liked having hairy armpits or not.
And what?
And it might seem such a simple, innocuous example, but how many things in our life do we just do because that's the way it was done, because someone told us to, because that's what culture does? That's our ego. That's our mind playing out being in charge without me even thinking about it. It's unconscious. And like Jung would say, Carl Jung, the famous psychotherapist, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate.
I love everything you shared in that. I mean, the example that comes to mind when you talked about that was moving in with someone and having two worlds collide is a really great opportunity to start questioning everything to be true. And it seems so trivial, but I remember moving in with my husband for the first time and we're putting the cutlery away. And I'm like, why are you putting the forks there? The forks go here. And he's like, no, they've always gone here. And I was like, no, they don't. And neither of us could justify why the forks go next to the knives or spoons. But it's just, that's all we've ever known. And we're like, no, I'm right. And they're like, no, I'm right. And so it's just going, hang on a minute. Like, why does it even have to be a thing? Like, why can't it just
Such
be?
a perfect example.
It's cutlery, for God's sake.
And if we are so convinced of where the forks need to go in the cutlery drawer, how tightly are we holding on to who we should be? How tightly are we holding on to what happiness is or success is? How tightly are we holding on to all of the much deeper identity beliefs when we get so caught up in a freaking cutlery drawer or an armpit hair? Like, we gotta, that 2%, when you ask that, the 2% are continuing to question that map of reality that's been created, because man, there are some very big assumptions that have been made in that.
Totally. 100%. And something also that I know a lot of people talk to who, in my experience, I think there's an association with this and unhappiness, and that is expectations. And I know a lot of people have expectations of how things should be, how people should act, and what their words look like. And I know someone who goes, I just don't have expectations anymore because I don't want to be let down. And I feel like it's not you have expectations or you don't. I feel like there needs to be a middle ground, sort of like having goals and having something that you're chasing, like working towards. I feel like there's a middle ground where going, you can have expectations because you can have standards for things, but you can have a more positive relationship to them. What's your relationship with expectations, first and foremost?
Yeah, the word that you said there, which it was coming to mind, was standards. You know, we have expectations in line with our values. And that is, what am I available for? How am I available to be treated? You know, that speaks more about my standards within myself than it does about your behavior. So if I expect that you have to show up to my birthday party with an $80 gift, right? That's a very clear expectation of somebody else, that you're likely to be a predetermined disappointment, right? But a standard, yeah, right. Like it is, like you're waiting for, like, you may as well expect disappointment if you have those kind of limits on the way people need to treat you, right? Or the way people need to act towards you. A standard that's in line with my values and my integrity is that if somebody treats me in a way that is outside of respectful, I know what I stand for. So if you're not going to respect me, if you're not going to treat me fairly or well, if you're going to abuse me, then I have an expectation that you're not going to do those things. So if you do, then you are breaching my boundaries, and I will make adjustments of you in my life. Be that set better boundaries, keep better boundaries, have an open conversation, all the way through to you're no longer allowed to be in my life because I'm not available for people like you who behave like that towards me. So I feel like that's the nuance. It's around the standards and the internal experience around what am I available for, rather than what will you do for me.
I really like the reframe around what am I available for, and that being a values alignment too, because that's very personal. It's like to your point, I'm not going to stand here and be disrespected because that's something that I'm not available for.
Yeah. Yeah, again, one's an internal experience of what is true for me in my lane. The other one is what you need to do. It's circumstantial for the other person. And that links very heavily back to happiness, if we will, because if you are relying on the circumstances of your life to be a certain way, that's an expectation. Right? So I have an expectation that if I, just for example, if you have an expectation that you train, you go to the gym, therefore you should look a certain way, right? Right. But I did the glute exercises like my friend did. Yeah, but she got booty and I got titty or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you can't expect to have the same results as somebody else just because you do the same thing. So the standards then is, no, I look after my body. That's a very different conversation than I need to get a certain result. And I think that's where the ambition piece and the expectation piece comes into it, because we want to be in a state where it's an internal experience, coming back to that stillness, the depths of self. If your power and control is within, then you will have happiness, you will have standards, you have integrity, you will live by your values. But if you are expecting things of other people and the world and circumstances, then you will be disappointed, which is the 98%.
And I want to dig into goal setting here, because I know a lot of people listening to this are really ambitious and have big goals set for themselves.
Yeah.
And so how does goal setting relate to happiness? I know that me, and I still get caught up in this, but a decade ago, I'm definitely someone that would be like, I've achieved my goals. Where's my bottle of champagne and fireworks for achieving a goal? I achieved a lot of goals where I achieved them. And then I'm like, there's this really empty, hollow feeling. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess it's on to the next one then. What can I do next? And I'm chasing that dopamine high of when I finally achieve the goal, maybe I'll be happy.
Yep.
What would you say to someone who is maybe finding themselves in that position where they have these big lofty goals and they think that's what is in the way of them experience that sustainable, true happiness?
Yeah, and I mean, I feel your sister. Like this nexting experience of like, okay, cool. So if I just get that body fat percentage, if I just get that job, if I just start that entrepreneur, if I just go into business, and then we get there and we do the hard thing and we've done it and it's void. It doesn't, we might feel, oh my God, I did it for half a second or a day or a month, and then our mind just goes back to, oh, well, that didn't scratch the itch. It's unsatisfying. And so it didn't give us the feeling that we're expecting it to. So we conflate happiness and success as the same thing. Conflate happiness and achievement of our goals as the same thing. So I think it's really important for us to separate the two. Go after your goals. Achieve cool things. It's amazing. How much fun is it to overcome all the hurdles that you thought were in your way to achieve the thing that you never thought that you could?
Mm-hmm.
That gives you a sense of maybe pride. It gives you a sense of accomplishment. It gives you a sense of even self-esteem because you've had discipline enough. You had to become the person. It's built your character. It's maybe gotten you a cool result, right? Just don't expect it to make you happy. They're two different things. Separate the two. It's not happiness. An analogy is coming to mind, and I haven't ever said it out loud, so I'm testing it right live as we speak here. But every time we eat food, we have to keep eating food, right? We have to keep doing it. In order to stay alive, we have to keep doing the food thing. No matter how much we eat, how many times have we gone out and gone nuts? And if you've ever tracked calories, maybe you've eaten thousands and thousands of calories the night before. You wake up the next day, you're still hungry again. How did that happen? So we're expecting our goals to satiate us, to keep us full forevermore. That's not how food works. It's not how achievement works. We're not expecting the same thing, like if we want eternal life, so to speak, depending on your belief systems, you're going to have to work on a deeper level than that. Because eventually this body's going to break down and it's going to go. It's the only guarantee that we have. So sustainable life forevermore is probably going to be on a deeper level, and so is our happiness. So I think that we need to stop conflating happiness with achievement. Keep achieving because it's fun. It's really a great thing to do in life. Like what else are we doing? We may as well overcome challenges and do hard things because it's really satisfying in the moment, just like the cheesecake is really satisfying today. Right? It is really satisfying today, but there's going to be another cheesecake. There's going to be another beautiful steak. There's going to be another salad that you want to eat because you're just going to have to keep on eating. Don't expect for you to be full forever from one meal.
Firstly, love the analogy. I think that hits the nail on the head. So let put that one in your back pocket for another time as well. And then I really love that you called out the importance of separating happiness from success and achievement. I think that's, even just one takeaway from this episode for ambitious women who I know are tuning into this is just being able to distinguish between the two and acknowledge that they're two separate things. Game changer. I know even just hearing you talk it out loud, I'm like, oh yeah, I still do that. I still equate success to some level with happiness. So there's some work I still need to do on that, but I think that's really powerful stuff to know.
And you know what, Miff? I just had this little almost like mini epiphany here. I feel like because we are ambitious, because we are driven, we can actually use all of that energy, well, not all of it, but we can use that energy and drive that we have and actually focus on happiness. We can actually put into that pot. That can be a goal. And it's kind of like one of those goals like fitness, right? You don't get fit and then it's done.
What?
Right? It's not how it works. Damn it. It's not how it works. You must maintain it. You got to continue on and you get more nuanced and you may not necessarily get fitter, but you kind of do. You get more optimized even as age happens. You're the best that you possibly can be. So I think that we can invest our time and energy, some time and energy at least, in our happiness as a separate goal almost, not with an end point though. It doesn't have an end. It's not an end point goal because you can select happiness in this moment by really, if I would, by being grateful, being present with what you have in this moment and looking back on how far you've already come and finding that deep stillness within. I think that really allows us, we can use our ambition to pursue happiness in a really meaningful, deliberate kind of way. Do the work.
I love that. And so if someone's sitting here going, yeah, I have the energy, let's channel it into this happiness business. Let's see what it's all about. What's really actionable steps someone can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to jump into the gratitude and the mindfulness and being present? What's a tip that you would recommend?
Yeah, I want you, the very first thing that I tell everybody, all my clients, if they're particularly in the beginning of this journey, just without doing anything, just observe your thoughts throughout the day. You don't even have to sit down on a cushion. A lot of people are particularly high ambitious kind of people don't necessarily want to sit on a cushion and meditate. I don't think you have to. I've done it lots in my life and, that's by the by. But I think that just see if you can notice as you're doing things, what's the narrative? What's the chatter? Start to observe it, because when you start to observe it, you create that separation between you and it. That's the very first thing, and you can do that right now. Even as you're listening, listeners right now, what's the story that your mind's telling you? What's she saying up in there? Is she noticing what's going on in the background? Are you thinking about the washing? Are you going, this doesn't apply to me? Are you thinking that she talks too much? Are you thinking that the dogs are annoying? Are you commenting on our appearance? What's going on in the chit chat in your head? When you start to do that and you cultivate the separation between your thoughts and the one observing it, that creates enough space for you to find happiness because it already exists within you.
I love that. And especially that third person perspective. I think when you realize, it sounds a bit woo-woo, but I can say that. But when you realize you are not necessarily you and you can remove yourself from that and have that disassociation, your world changes. When you're not necessarily tying your identity back to past experiences or emotions or thoughts that you're having, you can influence them because you acknowledge that they're not you and you can choose to be whoever it is that you want to be.
And I think that's just augmented what I said so gorgeously, Miff. So thank you, because when we get into observer mode, we now have power to make it change. We can influence over rather than being influenced by. Yes, that's juicy.
I like this. That's why I selfishly love doing podcasts too, because I get so much from these, and it expands my world. So thank you so much. And I'm curious to hear more about your book, Get Happy and Free. Why should someone get this? I mean, apart from obviously you have a huge amount of knowledge and wisdom about the subject of happiness, what lies on the other side of this book for someone?
Yeah, exactly what we've been speaking to the whole time. We really get to what the core problem is when we're looking at like why we are unhappy, this nexting kind of culture. If I just get the next thing, then I will be happy. And I break down all the myths about that. And look, I believe in all my writing and everything that I offer in the world. I want to actually give you how. Because I find so many, I get to the end of personal development books frustrated often, or I have done in the past, because I'm like, cool, you painted me a really good reason why. Like you gave me lots of why and you gave me lots of what, and then you're wanting me to buy the how and some other thing. And look, maybe from a business strategy, that's not the best thing for me, but from a soul's perspective, from what I'm here to give, to me, I've been given these gifts of wisdom. They don't belong to me. So there's how in this. This is literally how. This is literally, there's a chapter 13. It's called The Science of Misery. It's going to show you the breakdown of what's happening when you're getting yourself into a miserable state. And how do we interject? How do we literally interrupt the pattern of misery so that we can be in charge of our mind? How do we lead our fear? How do we translate our emotions? Because our emotions are just indicators communicating something to us. So we learn how to translate our emotions. I'm literally teaching you how to do the steps that are required to not bring you happiness, but bring you back to happiness. I honestly believe it is our natural state. It's just that everything that we have thought and all our conditioning and programming has been put on top of it. So I show you how to clear the rubble so you can get to the bottom of that in the book.
Amen to that. I would totally agree that I think it's our natural state, and us as humans have just gone and made it complicated for ourselves. And so it's really great to hear that you've essentially provided the playbook to help uncover and I guess release a lot of the baggage that we've picked up and carried along with ourselves all this time. So I'll definitely put a link to where people can grab a copy of the book in the show notes below. Where else can they find you and connect with you and learn more about what you have to share on this subject and so much more?
Yeah, look, I mean, in reference to the books, both of them are available on Audible, Spotify. I narrated them and I have a hoot doing it. So there's also worksheets that go with Get Happy and Free. So you can literally, if you talk about a playbook, then there's an additional workbook that goes with that. If you want to actually go play by play with, like at the end of each chapter, there is literally a too long didn't read kind of deal. Here's a synopsis. Here's what you need to know. So if you just want to go to the end of the chapters and get the here's what you missed kind of vibe and work on the workbook, go for it. It's awesome. You can follow me. My full name is Lunaria Gaia. I'm sure that you'll put that in the show notes. You Google that, Facebook, Instagram. I have my own podcast. I do daily reels, daily content. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on my YouTube channel, podcasts everywhere, all over the shop. And of course, there's a couple of books kicking around too. So lunariagaia.com is where you can find my website about my courses. And if you're curious about being mentored by me, then you can book a free discovery call. We can have a conversation and see if we're a match.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. If the listeners are committed to improving their relationship with happiness, then they can't ignore you. You are everywhere and your content is fantastic. So I definitely recommend first stop shop is find Lunaria on some platform and connect with her there. So thank you so much.
Wherever you fit, TikTok as well.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for your time today and for the fun chat. I had a great time. And most importantly, I'm sure the listeners got a whole heap of value as I did from our conversation today. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope this was helpful. If you thought of someone while listening to this podcast, I would be so grateful if you could share this episode with them. While you're doing that, please also take a moment to leave a review on the podcast if you haven't yet already. It takes less than a minute and it means so much to me and helps this podcast to reach more people just like you. Thank you so much for that, and I'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, go out and achieve every dream you have, because actually, you can.